Okay, so tonight we're diving deep into a mystery that has chilled people for decades now. The vanishing of the Sodder children. Christmas Eve, 1935, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodders, George and Jenny, they had 10 kids, and 9 of them were there that night, all caught up in that holiday spirit. But as the night goes on, their home catches fire. And 5 of those children just disappear, no trace.
Yeah, and what makes this case so unsettling is that it's not just a tragic fire, it's a whole bunch of strange events, unanswered questions. Like the fire just burned away all the answers.
Right, it's like one of those ghost stories where the facts themselves are the ghosts. So let's back up a bit. George and Jenny, they were Italian immigrants, built a good life for themselves in Fayetteville, had those 10 kids, a big, hard-working family, well-respected.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes that night so jarring. The fire starts really early in the morning. George, Jenny, and 4 of the kids get out. But the other 5, Maurice, Martha, Louie, Jenny, and Betty, they're just gone.
I can't imagine it. The scene must have been pure chaos. George, trying to get back into the burning house, cuts his arm in the process. And the ladder they always kept against the house. Gone. Water barrels frozen solid. Their trucks won't start. It's like every way out was intentionally cut off.
The details are what get you. Like you said, the fire department short-staffed because of the war. Plus, there were some communication problems, so their response was really delayed.
So they get there, the house is just a smoldering ruin. Intense heat, they say, wiped out any sign of the missing kids. Official conclusion, faulty wiring, an accident. But the Sodders, they didn't buy it for a second.
And they had every reason not to. I mean, think about it. George had just had the house rewired and it was inspected too. And then you have those really weird incidents leading up to the fire. Like there's that life insurance salesman. He gave George this really creepy warning about the house going up in flames. And then there was that visitor, right? The one who pointed to the fuse boxes and said they looked like a fire hazard.
Red flags everywhere, right? And then, as the Sodders start looking closer, they notice even more weird details about the fire and the aftermath. Like, the Christmas lights on their house, they stayed on the entire time, even though the power should have been out. And then later, they find the missing ladder, way down an embankment, miles from the house.
Yeah, all those inconsistencies, even the little ones, start to unravel the official story. The Sodders started to think this wasn't an accident, but something way more sinister, arson. And this is where those theories really start to spin out.
And one of the most persistent ones is about George.
Oh.
He was really vocal about how much he hated Mussolini. He was completely against fascism. And in their close-knit Italian community, well, that made him some enemies. Powerful ones. Could the fire have been revenge?
It's a question that hangs over the whole case. Did someone target George's family, maybe kidnap the kids to shut him up? It's a scary thought.
It really is. And as the Sodders dig into it more, they find even more details that point to foul play. A telephone repairman comes forward, says the phone line wasn't burned through, it was cut. Someone had to climb a pole to do that. Definitely intentional.
Oh, and there's another incident. A guy is caught stealing stuff from the Sodders' property around the same time, admits to cutting the phone line, claimed he thought it was a power line, denied any involvement in the fire, of course. But, it just casts another shadow over everything.
The Sodders weren't giving up, though. They hire a private investigator, C.C. Tinsley, and he finds some unsettling stuff. Turns out that life insurance salesman who threatened George, he was on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident.
Wow. That's a huge conflict of interest. Really undermines the official investigation, right? And feeds into the Sodders' suspicion that something's not right here.
Totally. And then Tinsley hears these rumors that Fire Chief Morris buried a heart he found in the wreckage. So the Sodders confront him, and he takes them to this metal box buried on their property. But it's not a human heart, it's fresh beef liver. Like someone was trying to plant evidence, to make it seem like the children died in the fire.
And it's not just that one time. The Sodders kept running into these obstacles, these hints of deception. It's almost like someone was working really hard to keep them from the truth.
But Jenny, the mother, she never gave up.
Yeah.
She refused to believe that her kids were gone. Challenged the fire marshal, saying there's no way their bodies could have completely burned up when things like appliances survived the fire. She even burned animal bones herself. And they didn't completely disintegrate.
Really shows you the power of a mother's intuition, right? Her refusal to accept what seems unacceptable. She even talked to someone who worked at a crematorium and he agreed. Human bones, they're really strong, even in intense heat. This just made her more convinced that if her kids had died in the fire, there would be remains.
It's heartbreaking, but you have to admire her dedication. But as time went on, their hope was kept alive by these weird sightings, rumors. Nothing confirmed, of course, but just enough to keep them going, to keep them searching.
And that's what's so captivating about this case. You've got the tragedy, the mystery, and this relentless pursuit of the truth. Makes you think about how even the most seemingly straightforward events can be hiding something dark and complicated. And some of those sightings, I mean, they were really disturbing. Like there was this bus driver who came forward, said he saw people throwing these balls of fire at the Sodder house right on Christmas Eve.
Balls of fire. Okay, now this is starting to sound like a horror movie. Didn't one of the Sodder kids, Sylvia, I think? Didn't she find something weird later?
Yeah, Sylvia found this object, hard, dark green. And it looked a lot like some kind of incendiary device.
So you're saying we could be talking arson here? Someone intentionally setting that fire?
Right, it really backs that theory up, And it makes you wonder, was it just about burning down the house, or was it about getting rid of the children too?
That's a scary thought. And then you have those people saying they saw the kids after the fire. Witnesses saying they saw them in a car speeding away that night. And then someone else even said she served them breakfast the next morning.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out where that piece fits in. If the fire was arson, maybe someone grabbed the kids before, kept them quiet, but you know how it is. Eyewitness accounts can be shaky, especially with all the chaos of something like this.
So the family's clinging to this tiny bit of hope. But then, in 1949, they decide to excavate the site where their house was. What were they looking for?
Well, I think part of them was hoping for some closure, even if it meant confirming their worst fear. They brought in a pathologist, Oscar Hunter, to run the dig. But what they found, well, no one expected it.
Didn't they find some bones?
They did, a few bone fragments, human vertebrae, actually.
I can only imagine how hard that must have been for the Sodders. After all those years hoping their children were alive, did that just crush all their hope?
Well, they sent the bones to the Smithsonian, to be analyzed, hoping for some answers, and what they got back was, well, it was fascinating and confusing.
What did it say?
The Smithsonian said the bones belonged to one person, probably between 16 and 22 years old. But here's the thing, none of the missing Sodder children would have been that old when the fire happened.
So now we've got even more questions. Where did the bones come from? How did they get to the Sodder house? Just a terrible coincidence? Or was someone messing with the family?
And get this. The Smithsonian report also said the bones didn't show any signs of being in a fire. It just doesn't make sense.
So now the Sodders are in this awful in-between place, relieved that the bones might not be their kids, but still no closer to finding them.
Exactly. It's like every answer just leads to more questions. But even with all that, the Sodders didn't give up. Their search took them everywhere. Some leads that looked good, some that went nowhere.
Wasn't there something about a letter?
Yeah, in 1967, Jenny gets this letter. It was postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a picture of a young man. Looked just like Louis Sodder, one of the missing boys.
Wow, can you imagine getting that after all those years? What did it say?
On the back of the picture, someone had written, Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, a lil boys, A90132 or 35.
That's chilling. So what do they do with it?
Well, they hired another private investigator to follow up on it, but he disappeared. Like, the case is cursed, makes anyone who gets close vanish.
But even with all the dead ends, the Sodders never gave up hope. Did they put up that billboard?
Yeah, right on Route 16. This haunting billboard with pictures of all 5 kids asking for information, reminding everyone that they were still out there somewhere.
It really became a symbol of their determination, didn't it? Like a symbol of the mystery itself.
Absolutely. The Sodders never stopped searching, never stopped believing they'd be reunited with their children.
It's amazing, really, how even with that billboard out there, with everyone knowing about the case, nothing, no new leads, no answers, like whatever happened just vanished into thin air.
Yeah, time usually makes these cold cases even tougher to crack. But with the Sodder case, it almost feels like time made things even murkier.
And then in 1969, George Sodder died, never knowing what happened to his kids.
And Jenny, his wife, passed away in '89, leaving behind a family still searching for answers.
And eventually that billboard, the one they put up hoping for a break in the case, it was taken down. But the story doesn't end there, right?
Nope, not at all. The other Sodder children, their kids and grandkids, they kept looking, still trying to find the truth.
So what are some of the theories they've explored?
Well, some people think the Sicilian mafia might have been involved, maybe as payback for George being so outspoken against Mussolini.
Brings us right back to all that political stuff. It's a chilling thought, that something this personal, this awful, could be connected to global politics.
Exactly. And then there's the idea that someone knew about the arson plan, maybe even offered to take the kids to keep them safe, took them out of the country, gave them new names.
So they just disappeared, never to be seen again. Almost scarier than thinking they died in the fire.
Of course, some people still think that's what happened, that the kids died that night, despite there not being any, solid proof.
It's like everyone has a piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
but nobody can put it together.
Even after all these years, the Sodder case is a mystery. It's a story that people keep coming back to, wondering what really happened on that Christmas Eve in 1945.
And I think that's why it stays with us, because it reminds us that some mysteries might never be solved. We're left with the unknown, thinking about those 5 kids disappearing into the night.
The Sodder children vanishing like that, it shows us that sometimes the scariest truth is the one that stays hidden. All we have are theories and this chilling feeling of what could have been.
Well, this deep dive into the Sodder case has been fascinating and sad. We've uncovered strange events, conflicting evidence, so many leads, but the truth is still out there.
And maybe that's the most important thing we can take away from this whole story. That some mysteries, well, they just stick around. They make us keep searching, keep asking questions, keep hoping that someday we'll know what happened.
And to our listeners, if you're as intrigued by this as we are, I encourage you to look into it. There's tons of information out there, articles, documentaries, podcasts. You never know, maybe you'll find something that gets us closer to understanding what happened to those children.
And as you're digging into it, think about what you believe happened to them. Were they victims of a horrible accident? Or was something more sinister going on?
Sometimes the best answers are the ones we come up with ourselves. Going through the evidence, accepting what we don't know, and letting the mystery stay with us.
The Sodder case proves that even with all the information we have these days, some mysteries just won't go away. They make us keep looking for answers, keep wondering, and never give up hope that someday the truth will come out.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into one of history's biggest mysteries. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop searching for the answers to the things that keep you up at night.